Assalamualaikum, ini Sembang Santai MITI Bicara ASEAN bersama saya Naila Huda, dan episod kali ini kami nak bincang pasal masa depan sistem kewangan serantau. Kita nak melihat bagaimana ASEAN boleh capai integrasi kewangan yang lebih inklusif dan inovatif. Sebab kita lihat sedikit kepada statistik, it's estimated that around 70% of Southeast Asians remain underbanked or unbanked. Ini bermaksud mereka tidak ada akses kepada fasiliti bank. 70% dianggarkan di Asia Tenggara. And this suggests remaining major gaps in access and literacy in finance. And we could be discussing about the most advanced tech in finance, the AIs of it all, big data, but it's also important to look whether this technology is actually accessible. Adakah teknologi dan fasiliti kewangan ini benar-benar sampai kepada rakyat di rantau ini. And for that, we are joined by Rafiza Ghazali this morning, Chief Executive Officer of KAF Digital Bank, one of Malaysia's first Islamic digital banks licensed by Bank Negara Malaysia. And at KAF Digital Bank, Rafiza leads efforts to widen financial inclusion through technology, strengthen Malaysia's Islamic digital finance ecosystem, and champion responsible, sustainable banking. Thank you so much, Rafiza. Good morning. How are you?
Hi, good morning. Yeah, I'm fine, thanks. And thank you for having me.
We're very happy to have you. A lot of interesting things we want to unpack with you. But before we talk about the future of financial services integration in ASEAN, maybe we can look a little bit to the past and reflect what has been going on. Maybe some of your thoughts on just the general current state of financial services in ASEAN. Where are we today?
Okay, so Malaysia Central Bank back in 2020 came out with the policy document on digital bank and invited participants to submit applications. So 2 years later, then they announced, 5 consortium that got the license, and we're one of them. CAF Digital Bank is a consortium made up of led by CAF Investment Bank and with 4 other Malaysian technology startups. So we have Kasem, StoreHub, Money Match, and Genexu. So we're probably the only one that's 100% Malaysian-owned digital bank. And it's interesting when we first embarked on this journey, right? So we got a lot of queries or interest, not just from Malaysia, from the other countries, because the way how Bank Negara invite people to do this is very different. So if you look at other countries like Indonesia, Philippines, what they do is they get the incumbent banks to digitalize. But Malaysia took approach that they came up with a separate guideline just for digital banks with the emphasis on financial inclusion. Because I think that's one of the agenda of central bank, to increase the, to widen the scope of financial services to ensure that especially the underbanked and underserved, have just the basic banking services. Now, another question that people ask me, okay, how do you define underserved? Is it B40 or is it people in rural areas? Yes, they are what they call it underserved, but as long as they're not currently served. So it could be someone, for example, a tuition teacher, in Kuala Lumpur who don't have fixed income. So they are currently, I suspect, not currently served, by the incumbent banks. That's number one. And number two, I think what we saw, the minute the digital bank, started to operationalize, then we started to see a lot of the other incumbent banks, accelerate their digitalization effort. I think prior to this, I think they were trying to do this, but I think there was no urgency. So the minute Bank Negara came up with, with the digital bank license, and suddenly you see, a lot more investments coming up to digitalize financial services. So for us, we see it benefit to the Malaysian society, because especially after COVID, you find that I think on the retail side it's not so bad, but on the small MSMEs, because what we found is that business banking still requires for them to go to the branch. And during COVID, a lot of this, number one, they needed help. So it was very difficult with COVID, with restrictions at that time. They were not able to get the help that they could, because a lot of the activities or services or processes still requires for them to do physical verification, and we saw that people queuing out and with all the distance, etc. And we saw a lot of, especially micro SMEs were badly hit, and with the digital banks now. The way how it's being done, a lot of the processes are automated, and another different from Malaysia compared to the others. For the digital banks, we're not allowed to have any physical presence, any branches at all. So that sets us apart from the incumbent banks. The incumbent banks still have branches. So the way how we design our banking services, everything can be done either on app or on the web. So and that's where I think it helps with the other ancillary systems as well. Suddenly you see the digital signing requirement, because all this needs to support the banking system. And then now you see the my digital IDs coming into play, because that will also help digitalizing banking services as well. So suddenly you see a lot of this digitalization efforts to support the digital bank comes into play. So that's where we are in Malaysia at the moment.
Yeah. No, you mentioned a lot of interesting points there, and I think it's important to point out the pandemic, right? Because I think it's something that we so easily want to forget, that blip in our timeline. But in terms of the context of digital banking, I think that was really crucial in accelerating the speed at which we adopted digital finance. But that's in terms of the Malaysian context. If we were to look regionally, as you mentioned, there's a lot of interest and curiosity from other countries in the region. What do you think are some of the lessons that could be shared with other countries that also want to go along this pathway of digital banking?
Yeah, well, you see, banks are all profit making in nature, right? And to serve the underserved, sometimes there's a lot of questions. Or will this affect our profitability? And you can't really. Yeah, and some people may even see this as more of an CSR activity rather than business
being a value or principle, right?
Yeah. So, and hence why when you start to do, when I start on this digital bank journey, and again, we look at all the various models of the digital bank in the country. And what we saw, what's interestingly, yes, not many could survive, for various reasons or another. But there are, other digital banks that look at an underserved are also being profitable. So it all depends. There's no right recipe, because, perhaps, the market in their country is a lot bigger, that could be a reason for it.
Yeah.
But, and what's interesting, in ASEAN, even though we're all in ASEAN countries, but they have different, what I call it, stages of readiness, state of readiness.
Yeah.
Because it all depends on, firstly, the basic needs, like, whether, the bandwidth is sufficient, the population of the country, are they young or are they aging population? I think to adopt digital banking, if you're in the young population, it's better. So different countries in ASEAN have got what I call it different ecosystem to support. So there's no right or wrong answer. But it helps when we can learn from each other. What works and what doesn't work. And a lot of knowledge sharing as well with some. So, I get invited to conferences, in Indonesia, in Manila, in Thailand. And, the good thing about it is that with everyone, knowing what the other countries are doing.
Yeah.
So the minute they know that, you just launch a digital bank, how was it, and I've also got approached by some of my counterparties in Indonesia, and they're also, offered help, aiding and assistance. So I think that's one of the, to me, interesting thing that happened, over the last 2-3 years. Everyone's, wanting each other to do well. We support each other. So I get, WhatsApp from some of these, other CEOs.
That's nice,
and ask how you doing and things like that. How's the digital banking is doing, and
No, it's very, I think, nice to hear the sort of community that you get. And just talking about ASEAN, if we were to compare with other regions across the globe, we're actually quite ahead in terms of digital banking, isn't it? I mean, I think we discussed this before the show. We were just talking about the ease of just, doing transactions. You don't even have the benefit of just, transferring money through digital banking. In some countries in the West, they don't even have, just a QR codes that we so easily take for granted these days in the whole of Southeast Asia, most Southeast Asian countries. What are your thoughts on that, on how, Southeast Asia has managed to sort of been sitting on this gold mine and, taken advantage of it way ahead of surprisingly Western counterparts?
Yeah, well, because a lot of strong collaboration between the central banks and the regulators in the ASEAN countries. I know there's been a lot of dialogues, there's been a lot of talks, and you can see that, one of the projects that we're embarking is the Project Nexus, driven by BIS. And the whole idea, the whole objective is that, we can do cross-border payments easily, quicker, in a more transparent manner compared to where it is now, despite, different currencies. Because, unlike European where they have euro, we still maintain our own currency, right? So it's always been, quite a challenge when you start to go other countries. And again, with the purchasing power of each country. So those little cents, do count, especially if, you go shopping in Thailand, you still calculate what it is, and there's a lot of hidden costs. And I think this is, with this embarking, and we have Singapore, starting their POC, and I think Malaysia soon will be, implementing it. We're starting to implement with selected countries for now to make sure that it works. I think this will really leapfrog, a lot more. What we call it, at the what you call it, at the mom and pops level, I'm not talking about businesses, business is slightly different. This is like, for us, when we want to visit other countries, it makes it a lot easier, to do that. And like we talk about it, now it's easy for other people to come over to Malaysia to do shopping, and because, or stay at our hotels and go to our beach, and so it's vice versa.
Yeah, no, I've had very interesting experiences recently, just in Thailand, in Jakarta. Obviously, I think fellow shopaholics will understand. I find myself at this mall, Tamrin City, and, we were discussing.
Tamrin, I know.
Yeah, right. I think the ladies will be very familiar with this. Yeah. And, I find myself discussing with the shop owners there, and they're very small warungs and SMEs. And, we were finding out, what's the best way to pay? Because I've got all my money in this digital bank, but they haven't got a card terminal. And then I'm thinking, have you got a QR code? And then I just, used one of my many apps that I could just, send money to. And, it's so seamless. And it's something that we take for granted, I think. But it's really amazing, and how fast things are progressing. But in terms of technology, how do you see new technologies could perhaps continue to evolve and disrupt this sector, because we're seeing things like AI progressing so fast, so rapidly. Do you see a lot of new technologies potentially being integrated into this sector?
So, what's interesting, what we found that it's the smaller companies that are actually leading it, the startups, because they're innovative, and so we're seeing more fintech companies that bridge the gap and help to facilitate, a lot of these cross-border initiatives. One of the startup that we work with, I hardly see the founder because she's always in Indonesia. And we're seeing more and more startups, even Indonesian startups, fintech startups that are exploring, coming to Malaysia. So it's before you only hear things like a lot more developed ASEAN countries like Singapore leading the role, but you're starting to see even Vietnam, even Philippines. I was in Philippines a couple of months ago, and it was just mind-boggling how excitement over there with the fintech community and how advanced they are as well. So you're seeing a lot of this technology being driven by smaller companies, and I believe that that's one of the way for them to disrupt some of the what I call the blockages that has been the challenges that I think a lot of probably the bigger companies were facing in the last 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, definitely exciting times ahead. I do want to pick your brain a little bit because I know you work a lot on Islamic digital finance and strengthening this ecosystem in Malaysia as well. Is that something that's becoming of interest to other countries in the region as well? I mean, digital banking on one hand, but Islamic digital finance is also up and coming.
Yeah. So we see non-Muslim ASEAN countries exploring, looking at our model, because obviously in ASEAN, Malaysia plays a leading role in terms of development of Islamic finance. Because a lot of, say for example, in a non-Muslim countries, they still have Muslim communities, and especially in the sort of rural areas. And what they found, what's worrying is that these Muslim, pockets of Muslim communities in their country are reluctant to bank, because I think that they are getting more awareness that the prohibition of riba in conventional banking. So you're seeing pockets of Muslim community who remain unbanked. And I think the government and the central banks, I spoke with one of the central bank in one of the non-Muslim ASEAN countries, how we did it, using digital, where you can reach out to them, because they are they're out in the outskirts, and they still keep physical money in their houses, and they're just not in the banking system yet. And we're seeing more of that now. So Malaysia led the way. So we've got 2 Islamic digital bank in Malaysia, and we also seeing other digital bank, like for example, Bank Islam, the incumbent banks, Bank Islam and Bank Muamalat, also invest heavily on becoming a lot more digital, and they've done a very good job at that. So I think this is something that whether or not the other non-Muslim ASEAN countries can learn from us. So,
I think that's interesting to see that there's interest from, as you said, non-Muslim ASEAN countries, and the fact that there's this growing awareness.
With the Muslim ASEAN countries, that's not a problem. Like in Indonesia, you have a lot of Sharia banking in Indonesia, so I think that one is not a problem. But we're talking about the non-Muslim, where it's almost unheard of, or even if they have a Sharia bank in their country, is not well capitalized and probably not well access to to their intended intended customers.
Do you see a lot of potential in this area, especially when we're seeing Islamic finance more and more increasingly, not just as a means of Sharia compliant investment and financing, but it's also seen as a more ethical and inclusive model as well, right? How do you see ASEAN potentially leveraging this as a model to promote growth and promote the fintech sector that's more aligned with more popular values like ESG, perhaps, right?
Yeah. So I think that one will take time because, Malaysia have been doing it for more than 40 years. So, and hence why, we're a lot more ahead. You have to remember, banks are a highly regulated, well, we need to because we are entrusted with public's money, so we're highly regulated, and for us, we have the what I call it central bank, our central bank, Bank Negara Malaysia, have done a lot to what they call it, to align their regulation environment. I mean, we have our own, Islamic Financial Services Act, which a lot of other countries don't have, And another thing that we're ahead is because we have the talent as well.
Yeah.
So Central Bank have invested, Bank Negara have invested a lot of money to build talent, to make sure that you have all the right infrastructure. We have one of the highest pool of Sharia committee or people who are accredited to be Sharia, Sharia committee members, which other countries may not have to. In fact, like I was just, the last 2 days I was at JIF, in organized by Bank Negara, so it's Global Islamic Finance Forum, and met up with a lot of Sharia committee members, and these are Malaysians, but they sit on they are Sharia committee member of an Islamic bank in UAE, in Pakistan, and majority of them, because they can only hold one bank. They can only be a Sharia committee of one bank in Malaysia. But that doesn't stop them from being Sharia committee of banks outside
the rest
Malaysia.
of the world.
The rest of the world. So majority of them sit on multiple country because we are exporting, Sharia committee knowledge and talents. And so I was in Oman, a couple of weeks ago, met up with a lot of Malaysians in Islamic finance work in the in the banks, doing I even met a Malaysian who's head of Sharia of an Islamic bank in Oman. So that's how strong we are, in terms of talent. So that's not something that other countries have the benefit with, and I think this is where I think Malaysia can play a role. Of course, we don't want our people to leave Malaysia as well. That's the last thing that we want to do. Not that I'm encouraging, but unfortunately, we're becoming exporters of Islamic finance talent, and
I mean, there's a demand, right? And we've got the supply of talent and expertise.
So that's why we need to continue to develop this talent to make sure that we have sufficient. Because if not, it's going to be very difficult. Because I remember 15 years ago when I was in one of the bank, and we have an Islamic banking window. At that time, anyone with Islamic finance background is highly marketable. They paid a premium because it's really difficult. Really difficult. So you're starting to get a lot of people with conventional background that go into Islamic finance. I'm one of them, with conventional background, because there's just so much demand. Yeah.
No, that's interesting that to hear that there's a lot of potential there, and that Malaysia is now. I didn't know that we're such a big exporter of this kind of talent and expertise. But looking at some of the things that you shared, markets across the region and how they've been receptive based on different factors, various factors, to different digital banking and Islamic banking. It just goes to show how fragmented still markets are in ASEAN. I want to go back to the topic of financial services integration. We were talking about the ease of shopping, regionally, right?
Being two ladies, that's our favorite topic,
that's
isn't
my
it?
main interest. My main interest is, can I shop in all the countries in the world with a QR code? But just talking about integration, that's always the key question and the key concern in ASEAN, right? How well can we integrate our financial services? Where do you see us now? And perhaps if you were to reflect on the past 5 years, has there been a lot of progress?
There's progress, but I suppose we are a Malaysian bank, But talking to some of my counterparts who have branches in other countries, I think there's still challenges because each country have got their jurisdiction. So again, like I said, each country have got what we call it the state of readiness, and I can understand that because you can't just push as much as we would like to. It all depends on now whether or not the regulatory environment can accept that. They have their various reasons and various steps that they need to go ahead before they can be at a certain level. But being more ASEAN in nature, I think one of the things that we would like to see more of ASEAN banks, because unlike Indonesia where they have a huge populations, other countries can't just be on their own. And I think the benefit is vice versa. Some of these larger countries, they, as much as they would like to, they also need to integrate. They can't just also be on their own. A lot of things are becoming, what I said, more regionalized. I give an example. Efforts in cybersecurity, and again being more digitalized, and there's also coordination on the anti-money laundering, scammers. I think this is some of the things that, as much as we would like to integrate, there comes the other challenges as well. So I think this is, as a regulator or as a policy maker, at the end of the day, they need to make sure that they're their country first, ASEAN second, and that's understandable. I think everyone has to think about that. But the more we become integrated, then there will come more challenges. Now, are we ready for that? As much as we would love to integrate everything, but there are certain issues which people the likes of me and you may not really understand. So we know private sector, especially on the fintech, we see many ASEAN champions technology companies. Grab, for example, you just download one app, but you can use in other countries. So we seeing these sort of smaller companies being able to do that. I think once we have that, so easy, isn't it? Like you have that, and you have other shopping platform where you can buy things from other ASEAN countries and you get it delivered.
I'm reminded of the recent sort of unrest in Indonesia, where people across ASEAN, they wanted to support some of the ojek riders. They could just easily from Malaysia buy them a meal, right?
Exactly. So we see more on that. So I think that's also one of the things that the government wants. They need to be for it to be market driven rather than top down approach. Because at the end of the day, where the money is, it has to be making commercial sense. As much as the government will play a part in making sure that we have the right environment, we have the right support, but at the end of the day, it's the market players, it's the private sectors that need to drive the activities.
And I think it goes to show in just the past 5-10 years that given the right ecosystem, the right support and environment, that these ideas, these initiatives can actually flourish really well.
But again, could we do better? Could we do better? Because I think there's still a lot of when I talk to some of the startup founders, there's still a lot of requirements, regulations that they need to adhere to. Rightly so. Again, there are always reasons why some of these regulations are there. But could we make it like what we call it green lanes? Support ASEAN companies first, rather than have other regions coming into ASEAN. So could we provide them with green lanes? So we're talking about Malaysia is also initiating a lot of what we call it employment pass.
Yeah.
Could we
digital
give,
nomad pass and whatnot,
could we give priority to the ASEAN countries?
Yep.
Like for example, in we see that in Europe, right? In Europe, if you're a European citizen, you can study in any
almost borderless.
Almost borderless, right? It's so easy to do business. Yes, of course, there will be a lot of people worried about, are you going to be taking my market share or whatever? But at the end of the day, yes, there will be some, what I call it, victims, but at the end of the day, it's for the future good. If majority can benefit of it, why not?
Yeah, that does bring me to my final point. A lot of interesting points there, but I do want to hear some of your wish lists perhaps for the next 5-10 years. What do you hope to see in terms of financial integration, greater financial integration, so people like me can shop more easily?
That's the objective, isn't it?
Yes, some of your wish lists.
Okay,
you can share.
Because we are a Malaysian bank, so there's a lot of what I call it community within the Malaysian banks. The other bigger Malaysian banks where they have ASEAN presence, I think they don't have that a problem. But what I would like is for us to replicate what we have among the local banks in Malaysia with the ASEAN banks. A lot of cooperation, a lot of, learning sessions. I know everyone's, have got their, what I call it, secret recipes. Or, we're not asking for, what's your strategy or everything. But, I think a lot of cooperation, hey, this is what we're facing at the moment. I think a lot of that, a lot of community, maybe even dialogues, that could be something which the central banks can organize, where all the banks in the countries can learn from each other. If that could be done, I think that would be nice.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll be able to see more of that. Truly exciting times ahead for the region. Thank you so much, Rafiza, for sharing a lot of your thoughts, not just on financial integration, but just some of your experiences, strengthening Islamic digital banking at CAF. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah,
Alright.
Itu saja untuk Sembang Santai MITI Bicara ASEAN. Jam ini bersama saya Nala. Kita jumpa lagi.